welcome back for another fun hat. This is another colorwork hat in several different sizes, and I'm so excited to show you this today. This was done in a collaboration with Webb's Yarn. Their yarn line is the Valley Yarns, and this is so squishy. I've really enjoyed working with the Northfield line. It is 70% merino wool, 20% baby alpaca, and 10% silk, so it is absolutely squishy. This has 124 yards per 50 grams. The colors that I'll be using for this hat are sand, chestnut, and Seaspray. But be sure to pick whatever colors you want. There's a lot of colors in this line. I will be labeling these as color A, color B, and color C when it comes to working the chart and when we start working this up in the round. That way, if you do substitute colors, instead of getting confused, it's just A, B, and C. You will also need a pair of scissors today to fasten off. A stitch marker is absolutely necessary. I would not want to do this without a stitch marker because we're working continuous. And then you will also need two crochet hook sizes. This is the H 5mm and this is the G 4mm. These are the furl streamlines, and I'll have links for all the supplies in the description. We will be using the size G for this bottom ribbing only, and then the rest of the hat will be worked in the size H. This is a brim hat where we flip it up. I just want to make a quick note. I will be making it as here, but if you want to not have a brim that's flipped up, you can go ahead and half the stitches and just have a single layer bottom. But I'm doing the double brim by flipping up. I will be making the teen small adult size today. I find this one fits most women, but there are other sizes in the pattern, so be sure to check out that pattern as well. And then as an extra little option, if you'd like, pom-poms are always cute to put on hats. I love them. My husband and children don't care for them, so it's really personal preference on that, but I thought I'd mention that the pom-poms are really cute on top of these hats. Let's go ahead and get started. For the size teen, adult, small, I will start by making a slip knot and then placing that onto my hook. And we are going to be chaining 21 for this size. It will be different depending on what size you are making, but for the teen, small, adult, go ahead and chain 21 stitches. Once you chain 21 stitches, we're going to go ahead and start working a single crochet into the second chain from the hook and across. I like to tighten down my last chain as I turn and work. So now I will single crochet into the second chain, and then in every single chain across. So we will have a total of 20 single crochet stitches for this ribbing. Now that I've worked all the stitches across, it's time for us to turn. We're going to chain one, and working in the back loop only for the rest of this ribbing, we will start by single crocheting into that back loop only in each stitch across. When we look at a stitch on the top, we can see how this has what looks like V's that run along the top. We want to simply enter the back part of that V that's the farthest away from us only, and that will help create this beautiful ribbing. So now I'm just simply going to single crochet 20 across here in the back loop only. Now that we've worked that row, we're simply going to be repeating that row again and again to get that beautiful ribbing. So I will turn, chain one, and single crochet in the back loop only for all 20 stitches across. Now we will continue to single crochet across all these 20 stitches until we have a total of 72 rows. When you get to 72 rows, we can check it to make sure it's going to fit around our head. But as you can see here, these are all the rows. This is my join, and these are the rows that I worked. There are 72 here. So work until you have 72 rows, and then come on back and we'll talk about that join and fit. Now that I have 72 rows for the size that I'm working, it's time to join them. But before you do, if you want to check and make sure that this fits around your head, just kind of hold it. This is a good time to do so. Remember, it should have a lot of stretch, and we do want it to be a bit snug because we want this to hold on place on our head. But if you feel you need to add a few more rows, please do so. And then this next step when we work around the top will be the same amount of stitches as the pattern states. But for me, 72 rows works great. I'm going to go ahead and fold in my sides And then we're going to be joining these together. To join these together, I'm going to start by chaining 1. And then we will be working through the whole stitch for this one. And then we will grab the loop from the very first row. So we went through the stitch on our current row and we're grabbing the loop from our first row, and now we will yarn over and slip stitch those together. And we're going to be doing that all the way down for all 20 stitches. We're just grabbing both of these sides and we're slip stitching them together. Now remember, this side that we're seeing here will end up being hidden when we flip up our brim. So let me show you what that looks like on the example hat. So this is how this one went, and the seam is right here. And you can kind of tell when you're wearing it, it's really hard to tell, but we can see where the seam is. And as we flip this up, you really can't tell where that seam is. It hides nicely in that ribbing. And that's what we're going for with this one as well. So we want to slip stitch through our current row, grabbing the first loop from the first row, and then slip stitch those together all the way down. And now that we have all those stitches joined together, we will put our seam in place, and we're simply going to rotate our piece, and we'll be working across the hat on this top side and in the round. We're going to take our G hook and set it aside. We are done with our G hook for this pattern, and we're going to grab our H hook. We're going up a size to the 5mm hook, and we will be working in this one from here on out. Now for these next steps, you will want to grab a stitch marker because our rounds will be worked continuously and they can be difficult to keep track of, so I find it really essential. I'm going to go ahead and chain 1. I just find it helpful for this very first part, but it's not necessary. Now we are going to be slip stitching 1 stitch per row all the way around. So since we had 72 rows, or if you did a few more, that's okay. We're still slip stitching 72 stitches evenly all the way around the top of this brim. So I'm going to start by doing my first slip stitch, and I'm not doing these tight. I want them done somewhat loosely so that they don't mess up the sizing of the hat and you don't have like a really tight slip stitched row around right at the top of that brim. So now I'm just going to keep slip stitching 1 stitch per row, or 72 stitches for this size, all the way around till I get back to the beginning of the round. All right, so now that we've slip stitched around all the way back to the beginning, it's time for us to go ahead and start working in our stitches. We will not be joining to this first stitch of the round. We're simply going to be working continuously, so there's no join and chain 1. We're going to go ahead and work right into that first stitch. So for this around, we will be single crocheting in the back loop only. So we're going to leave this front loop here, and only in the back loop only of that slip stitch we will do a single crochet. But before you go and I let you go do this round, I want to talk about how you're going to work these single crochet stitches, because when we start the next round we will be working in split single crochets. What that means is we will need to make more space for the stitches, and we'll start practicing that on this round so our next round is a bit easier. So when I insert the back loop only, yarn over and pull up a loop, here's the important part. You want to pull this up a bit more than you're used to. It should at least be the height of the other loop on your hook. And the reason why is we are creating a larger space on the front, this V, so that we can work into that V on the next round with the split single crochets and get those knit look stitches that line up oh so nicely for color work. So I'm going to work this around by doing the single crochets in the back loops only of those slip stitches. But when you pull up a little bit more than what you're used to, you'll get used to doing it with some practice. And the V's on my front don't look squished down or anything. They're nice and open and ready for the next round. So come on back when you've got this round complete. so we're back around again. We have our first round here of those single crochet stitches, and now we're ready to work in that split single crochet. So I'm going to move my stitch marker for this very first stitch. We'll continue working this round all in the color A, so it's a great time for us to get a little bit of practice on this. So I'm going to go ahead and work the first stitch here as a split single crochet and then place my stitch marker, and then we're going to go over that in detail once I get my stitch marker out of the way here. So when we look at a stitch, on the front here we see this V, and on the back there's an upside down V. So what we want to do is we want to insert our hook right into the center of that V like we're splitting it, and then on the back we come out through the upside down V. Notice the lines on each side of that hook. Then we will yarn over, pull up a loop higher than we normally do. If you're struggling with the stitch, most likely the culprit is this loop here, which is the magic loop. We want to pull that up a bit more. That's what changes the height of any stitch. Then we're going to yarn over and complete that, and we've got a nice V here on the front. So we're just going to do that all the way around, practicing the split single crochet stitch before we throw in any color work. This is a nice round to really get your tension right. This stitch takes some practice sometimes, so don't feel frustrated if you don't get it right away. And you might notice that when I'm working this, I don't have any resistance and it seems like I'm just doing single crochets, but I'm doing split single crochets. The reason why is practice. That's really it. The main thing is practicing getting that tension right, because if your tension is too tight, you won't be able to enter the stitches as flawlessly as you might see on your screen here. So practice going around. If you're struggling, it's probably this pulling up that loop and pulling up a bit more so that you have space the next round to really work it with some ease. Now that we've completed round 2, it's time for us to bring in our color B for this next round. But before we get started, I want to talk about the color work chart. So let's take a look first at the key. So when we look at our chart, we'll notice we have different blocks of color and then a few different symbols. When something on the chart has grayed out or no stitch, it's because we've decreased, so the stitch is no longer there. So we just simply glance over those. We don't do anything about them. We just pretend like they don't exist anymore. Then we have our color A, our color B, our color C. This is the symbol I'm using for a round where we will do our single crochet in the third loop, which creates a nice braided look across the front. We'll talk about that when we get there. And then when we see these symbols together, we are doing a split single crochet 2 together. So we're going to work the 2 stitches that these are on, and we'll split single crochet those 2 stitches together. Now let's take a look at our chart. For this chart, it is worked from bottom up and from right to left. But notice there are only 9 stitches, and that's because this is a 9-stitch repeat. So when we work these rounds, such as round 3 that we'll be starting very soon, we will work from right to left, and we will repeat again and again until we get to the end of the round. Notice on round 14 is where we have these special symbols where we will do a single crochet in the third loop, and I will show that round on camera. And then up here at round 20 we start to decrease, and when we decrease we're taking away stitches, which means we have that grayed out no stitch area, and we'll be going and doing some of these decreases on camera as well. What I'm going to show you next is round 3 and round 4 and how to carry your yarn. And then I'm going to let you work some rounds by yourself because it would be tedious to do these rounds on camera. And then I'll come back for round 14. So let's get back to that hat. So for round 3, the first stitch in the round will be with our color A. So I'm going to go ahead and create that stitch, but I will show you the next stitch in our round will be with our color B. So I'm going to get out my color B, and we'll be changing colors right off the bat here. So we will work our very first stitch by yarning over and pulling up that loop and pulling it up quite a bit. But before we yarn over and finish this split single crochet, we want to grab our new color, yarn over with our new color, and then pull through both of the loops on the hook. What that does is now we've completed the first stitch of the round, and it set us up to work with our new color, color B, for the second stitch. I've marked that first stitch of the round, and now for our color B, we will work the next 4 stitches. Now this is also where we're going to talk about carrying the yarn on the back of the color we're not using. So I'm going to work the first 2 stitches as a split single crochet in the color B. And then I do not like to carry a color of yarn in this yarn weight for more than 3 stitches at a time. So let me show you what that means. When I insert this next stitch, I'm going to take the yarn that is just sitting on the back, so my color A, and I'm going to lay it over my hook. And then I'll go back to my color B, and I'm going to leave that color A on my hook, just laying there. And when I do my next stitch with color B, it grabs the yarn on the back and it creates a float. The reason why floats are important is because we don't want to have a really long float that might either mess up our gauge and sizing, catch on our ears or fingers, and we want it to be nice and neat on the back and not too messy. So then I will continue to do this last stitch because we're doing 4 in a row with the color B. I'll stop here, change colors, and then I'll be doing the next 5 stitches in a row. So for our stitch repeat, it's 4, and then we'll go back to this stitch. But that means we'll be doing 5 in a row. So once again, I'll want to grab the color that's hanging out on the back here and be sure to catch it on the back so that those floats don't end up being too long. And now I'm just going to keep doing those repeats until I get to the end of the round. And then we'll work the next round. Notice I just caught that. You'll get used to it where I just kind of grab it with my fingers and I don't have to put down my color B when I do so. So I'll try to do that in slow motion just in case you want to get a bit faster at color work. Learning these tricks can help. So I'll do the first 2. And then on my third, I'm ready to grab that. I'll just simply slide it with my fingers on top of my hook. Now I've grabbed that so I don't have to carry it across 5 stitches without grabbing that float on the back. And then I'll go back to my color B. So keep working the stitch pattern for this round, and I'll show one more round working with the color work. Now I'm at the end of round 3, and the last 4 stitches are in color A, and I'm ready to start round 4, and I haven't completed round 3 because round 4 starts with my color B. So before finishing that last stitch on round 3, I want to switch to the color I'm going to be using into the next stitch, the first stitch of round 4. Now for round 4, we're going to go right into that color pattern. It starts with doing 6 color B in a row. So that's what I'll be doing, and once again, you want to go ahead and catch floats on the back. We do not want to float 6 stitches. It will mess with our gauge. It won't be as pretty. And I like floating them versus working over them because I have had people ask if they can work over the yarn completely, hiding it. And you can. You absolutely can. But when you do that, it can make the hat feel a bit stiffer, and it can also change the gauge just slightly. So it's kind of a personal preference, but I really like working it in this style. This is the Fair Isle colorwork style where we're floating our yarn, our unworked yarn, on the back. So for this round, I started with 6 split single crochets in the color B, and then I did 3 split single crochets in the color A, and I'm going to be repeating that all the way around, just repeating that 9 stitch pattern. And I want to show you with the hats that I've completed. Oh, I probably haven't woven in my ends, but if we see any, we're going to ignore them. So for this hat, you can see the floats, just so you can see the inside of the hat and what it looks like. These are really nice, clean floats. I know it somewhat looks messy, but it would look so much messier and so much more chaotic if we didn't grab the floats as we went. This makes it nice and clean, and then the hat is still flexible and wearable. That's one of the main reasons why I like Fair Isle crochet. Now I want to talk quickly about our seam. You can notice, mostly because of this round, that we do have a seam and a little bit of color jogging that happens with this when we're working continuously. It really doesn't bother me too much when you're wearing it. It's really not that noticeable. And even in these shapes, you're really not going to notice that color jog too much. I think it's less noticeable than joining and chaining one and adding a bulky seam in there. So I'm going to let you work this color work up and through round 13, and round 13 is this solid color. This is still worked in a split single crochet, and what we will do on round 14, we'll flip out this braid here so we can see the top of the stitches, which is quite fun. So work through round 13 and come back for round 14. So now that I'm back and we are ready to begin round 14, I've already set up on the last stitch of round 13 to go back to my color A, and we are done with our color B, so we can go ahead and fasten that off and weave in the end when we're ready, either now or when we're done with our project. Now for round 14, you'll notice on the chart that it has some dashes, and in the instructions it says to work in the third loop. So we're going to talk about what that means to work in the third loop. When we look at a stitch, we'll see a V on the front, and then we see a V on the top. And if we look just behind this top V, we find our third loop. So it is this horizontal bar on the back of our work. You'll see an upside down V, the horizontal bar, and then the top loops. Now we normally enter our stitch right here, but we're going to be rotating to the back and entering only through this third loop. What that does is it kind of flips this top V out towards us, creating a band of almost like braided knit look for this round, simply by working the same type of stitch just in that third loop on the back of the stitch. So I'm going to be taking my color A and I'm going to go through that third loop and do a single crochet stitch. Now remember, the next round will be going back to split single crochets, so you will want to work these loose enough so that the next round it's easy to get into that front V like on the previous rounds when we go back to working as a split single crochet. But for this round, go all the way around, entering that third loop, so that horizontal bar on the back, and then completing the single crochet stitch. Now for round 15, we're going to go back working a solid round in the split single crochet, and then I'm going to have you follow the color work until we get to round 20. So follow through round 19, and when we get to round 20, I'll come on back and we'll talk about decreasing. Here we are at the start of round 20. This will be our first round where we will start decreasing some stitches to decrease the top of the hat. Now before we get started with our yarn, I want to go back and take a look at the chart just in case you're working from the chart. So as we look at the chart for round 20, we see these two slanted lines slanting towards each other. This indicates that we are going to split single crochet these stitches together and make a decrease, which is why there's a gray space on the next rows, because we've decreased a stitch. There's no stitches for the gray space. We're taking it down from 9 stitch repeat to an 8 stitch repeat for round 21. So now let's go back and look at how this happens with our yarn. So for round 20, the first 2 stitches are done with my color C. I'm going to go ahead and do the first stitch and mark it. And then the second stitch, and we change to our color A. And then this next part is where we are going to be decreasing. To decrease, we're going to insert our hook into the first split single crochet, pull up a loop. Now insert your hook into the next split single crochet and pull up a loop. And then since we're changing back to our color C, we're going to yarn over and pull through all the loops on the hook with our color C, decreasing once. Now I'm going to continue doing my color work and we'll practice that decrease one more time. So now I'm starting my stitch repeat again for this round. So the first 2 stitches will be worked in color C. But we'll change to color A in order to work this next decrease. And then we're changing back to color C and then finishing our color work pattern. Now when you work back around again and we're working into these decreased spaces, because we won't be decreasing for round 21 and we'll just be working in the color work pattern, I like to insert my hook right in the center. You can see like there's a V here and a V here. I like to insert between the first V and then the V behind it to work that stitch so that it just keeps that decrease together as it's supposed to be. So keep on working these rounds with the decreasing through round 33. All right, now that we've worked through all these decreases, which I love how they are planned between the patterns, so we've got that kind of joining at the top and it makes a really nice, unique look. It's time for us to finish closing this because obviously we do not want a hole in the top of our hat. So we're going to do that by weaving through the front loops only of every single stitch around. So you're just going to grab your tapestry needle after fastening off. Now after going through the front loop of every stitch around, we're simply going to pull our tail and look at that, it closes that hole. But obviously you can see we still have an issue here. This round can be pulled really tightly, but the round below, like there's some gapping between just by the nature of decreasing. Now, even if we had decreased with regular single crochet stitches, you often end up seeing this at the top of hats. So here's how we're going to fix that. We're simply going to bring our yarn down to the round right below it, and we're going to weave through those stitches on the round below all the way around. And then once after we go around again, we can pull that tight and notice how that's a much cleaner closure. I really like doing that extra one. Plus it also helps your tail end when it comes to just doing some extra weaving in. So now I'm going to finish by weaving in my tail end a little bit more and fasten off. And that's it. Now we have a really cute flipped brim hat for us to wear during those cold months. The top of this looks really unique. I really like that, how it comes together to a really fun and unique shape on the top of your head. You can place a pom-pom here if you would like, or just go ahead and wear it. Now you will notice there's a little bit of color jogging here. What you can do is take your yarn from the inside, because I haven't weaved in my tail ends yet. And you can grab your tail end that is right here and you can pull it to the front. So I'm going to show you how to do that now. And then I'm going to use this tail end. This is really just a little bit of a perfectionist type ending. I normally just leave this type of stuff, but this one kind of drives me crazy. So we're going to go ahead and do a kind of mock stitch. I'm going to go underneath what would be almost like that V on this side. And then I'm going to go to the middle of this V that is on this side. And we're just kind of doing a little bit of a mock stitch there. You can already see it kind of brings it together a little bit more. And I'm going to, on the back side, weave this together to kind of get rid of that hole a little bit. So you can see as I weaved in that tail, I kind of solved one of the color jogs that was driving me a little bit crazy. Otherwise, it's really difficult to notice where your seam is for this hat. Thank you so much for joining me today for this really fun colorwork hat project. I really enjoyed this one and I hope you do as well. Whether you wear it yourself or you gift it for someone else, this is a really awesome hat to wear during those cold months. Please be sure to hit that subscribe button and come back soon for more crochet or knit fun. Until next time.